All right, guys. So there was a report that came out a few days ago, which I saw, and I have to admit, at first I was skeptical. I was like, I don't know, this seems a little much. Is this really accurate? But now we have verification from a number of different outlets, so I wanted to share it with you. Apparently, Egyptian intelligence officials reached out to Israeli officials about 10 days ago, and they were like, hey man, we're hearing rumblings of an imminent terror attack that's going to happen against Israel. Now, according to Netanyahu, this was never brought to his attention. Nobody ever brought this to him directly, and so nothing was really done about it. So here's Ken Klippenstein of the Intercept. He's talking about it here. Sources confirmed reports that emerged on Monday to the effect that senior Egyptian officials had warned Israel of an impending assault from Gaza. They said Egyptian intelligence officials had indeed shared warnings with their Israeli counterparts, but the information was not specific or focused and was not brought to Netanyahu's attention. Well, let me just pause there to say, if they're saying it's coming from Gaza, that is somewhat specific. In other words, it's not going to generate in the West Bank. It's going to generate from Gaza. So at least there's some specifics here. Explanations for the intelligence fiasco suggest Israel has grown far too reliant on its cutting-edge defense technology, whereas Hamas had learned the lessons of its vulnerability to Israeli eavesdropping and surveillance and reverted to more basic means of communication to avoid detection. Israel was also convinced that Hamas could become a rational governing force propped up with money from Qatar and work permits for Gazan laborers in Israel. In the face of this colossal failure on his watch, Netanyahu is working to protect his rule and legacy, even as he directs preparations for war. Hamas is also stunned. Quote, their success surprised them too, a diplomatic source in the region told Al-Monitor on condition of anonymity. They hope to kill some Israelis, embarrass the IDF, and return to Gaza with 2 or 3 kidnapped Israelis. Instead, they roamed inside Israel for more than a day, killing over 1,000 Israelis and getting stuck with something like 200 abductees. They are very worried. With 2 abductees, they could have negotiated with Israel for permission to build a seaport and freedom for hundreds of prisoners held in Israeli jails. With more than 100 abductees, they will face the entire Israeli army inside Gaza. That's the tragedy of their success, the diplomatic source added. That is wild, man. What happened was Israel got very complacent because they have all this high-tech stuff. You know, their defense capabilities are colossal. They have this like high-tech wall and stuff, and they have all this spying technology that they've been, I think it's called Pegasus. I think we reported on it when it came out. And so they felt like, hey, we're hearing nothing about Hamas planning some sort of terror attack. It seems like there's been relative calm for an extended period of time now. So we just don't think Hamas is going to launch a full-scale war. They even came out and said that at one point. And apparently they didn't realize that Hamas had reverted to old-school means of communication. They weren't relying on technology anymore. And again, one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle here as to how this happened, how this unfolded, is that the IDF was redirected to the West Bank to support illegal settlers who are taking more land and raising more villages. And those soldiers were on the border with Gaza, but they were moved elsewhere. So there was this opening on the border with Gaza, and like they say, even Hamas was like, holy cow, we didn't think we would be able to get away with all of this. And so now the consequences are dire. By the way, you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of the very famous memo that was on George Bush's desk. Bin Laden determined to attack within the U.S. This was before 9/11. And what did they do about it? Dickie McGeezax. They did nothing about it at all. This is the Israeli version of that. So then also, this is an important point, and not many people know this, but this is in 2019. So this isn't even one of those old school like 1990s clips, although back then they were saying some questionable things too. Hamas was in many ways propped up by Israel because they were the more secular PLO. They were more afraid of them, so they wanted to prop up Hamas. And here's Netanyahu. This is in 2019. Quote, anyone who wants to thwart the establishment of a Palestinian state has to support bolstering Hamas and transferring money to Hamas. He said this to the Likud party's Knesset members in 2019. Quote, this is part of our strategy. And this is from Haaretz, one of the top newspapers in Israel. They've been scathing against Netanyahu, basically blaming him squarely for this terror attack. Look, they said it. What more do I have to add to it? They said it's part of our strategy to support Hamas because we feel like they're such a bad representative that people will be less likely to support a Palestinian state if Hamas is the head of Gaza, and if Hamas is a face of Palestinians more generally. Well, how'd that work out? Not so well, now did it? So, oh man, this is wild stuff. The weird parallels to 9/11. Because, by the way, the parallel here is that, and you guys know this, there's been 1,000 articles written on it, but the U.S. supported Osama bin Laden when he was in Afghanistan fighting the Soviet Union. Because the Soviet Union had, of course, invaded Afghanistan way prior to us. And you had, like, U.S. newspapers calling Osama bin Laden a freedom fighter. Oh, he's a freedom fighter. And so we support this anti-Soviet crusader. And it's like, we gave him money, we gave him weapons, and later on that was used against us. This is a very similar thing. Prop up Hamas, and then Hamas, of course, was used against Israel, and they did a vicious terror attack which killed innocent civilians. And now Israel's responding to that by doing vicious attacks that kill innocent civilians. So, quite a wild backstory, man. When you follow all the ins and outs of what's going on in this war, in many ways it's stranger than fiction. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.